Hi hobby friends, let's talk about craft worlds. Have you had enough of the Eldari yet? Obviously that's a trick question. It's quite literally impossible to have too much of the space elves. I thought today I'd use 5 of those snazzy new Storm Guardians to take a look at 5 different approaches to batch painting. And hey, why not paint each of the major craft worlds too? 2 guides for the price of 1. We're going to kick off with my home team of Ulthwe. These guys have been circling the Eye of Terror for an eon or two, so today I'm foregoing the usual fairly clean look I give them, and we're going to look at a nice effective way of getting them grim and dark. Get your filth brushes at the ready. I've primed this guy in black and thrown a black paint over that too, so I have the right base for the rest of the work. I put a little somber grey in my airbrush and give him a gentle zenithal highlight as well. This is the step you'd want to swap out with dry brushing if you are sans airbrush. You'll notice I left the head off of all of these guys. We're going for efficiency here, and that little trick will save us quite a bit of time. Okay, let's take a look at that head. An orange base coat will give us a strong foundation. This gets more or less completely covered over with a natural white though, which is a couple of shades too bright for a real Ulthwe bone colour, but we need to go up in value to cover ourselves for a later step. I also threw on an undershade / filter of transparent raw sienna ink, but feel free to skip that one if you don't have an airbrush or just can't be bothered. Right, let's stick that head on, shall we? I consider sub-assemblies a last resort necessary evil, to be honest, so I try and get things glued ASAP. Throw some speed paint red on the top knot, and we are well on our way to being done with this guy. Let's start beating him up a little though, shall we? I put off buying reverse action tweezers for quite a while because they seemed an unnecessary luxury, but I was definitely wrong. These things are great for putting on transfers, holding bits of sub-assembly, or, like here, holding bits of sponge for weathering. I've got a fairly random mixed grey on my palette, and I'm sponging that on gently, aiming mostly for edges and raised areas. This is acting as the main component for our definition, a job normally reserved for something like edge highlighting, so try and be controlled and thoughtful even though we're after a random sort of a look. If you think it would get dinged in the heat of battle, give it a splodge with the sponge. I also got out my extra skinny brush and did some more controlled scratches with black and white on the face and a really light grey on the shoulder exhaust thingies. Bit more red here and there, eyes painted, gems done, and on to the fun bit. If you've been watching my videos, you'll have seen me do this before, and if not, check out the Death Corpse of Krieg videos for a little more detail. To avoid this video becoming a true beer moth though, all I'll say here is we're adding a nice gunky burnt umber oil wash all over. I want this wash to stain the black and get into all those nooks and crannies, so I leave him for about 10 minutes before cleaning him up. Using a cotton wool bud, I'm cleaning the upper surfaces of this guy and leaving the recesses nice and oily. The next day, when he was dry, he got a coat of matte varnish, but that was because I like my minis to be nice and matte, not because the oils need any kind of varnish. I matte varnished every mini in this video as a final step as it happens. And that's it, he's all done. Hang around for the reveal at the end though, or skip ahead I guess. But don't you want to see a super speedy airbrush-free Saim Hann? Of course you do. Okay, I know I just said airbrush free, but I'm going to do my base coats with the airbrush, I'm afraid. The only thing you have to do differently, if you don't have an airbrush though, is find a spray can of deep red primer and a light grey primer and use those instead. The deep red goes on the body and, unsurprisingly, the light grey goes on the head. Next up, grab your dry brush board, I use a cork tile, and get yourself a line of red paint. If you want to avoid dusty looking dry brushing, keep that brush a little bit damp and use something like a stubby makeup brush rather than some old beaten up basing brush. Just like a regular zenithal, we're looking to hit all those upward surfaces, so try and keep your brush strokes coming down from above. If you take a little time, building from a darker to a lighter red and even up to an orangey red, you should get a good, smooth transition. Exactly the same with the head, but using a pure white instead. I took the time to throw on some brushed edge highlights on this guy as well, but you could certainly do that with careful dry brushing too. Just don't forget that for this sort of warm red, we need to move towards orange, not white, for our highlights. Hit some details, and congrats, you now have a speedy Saim Hann Super Trooper. But why stop there? How about we learn how to do gorgeous white at lightning speed with the help of a Biel Tan fighter? White doesn't have to be a chore. We just have to remember that our shadows can be, well, any colour, but a lot of the time that colour is going to look best if it is a desaturated blue. So that's what I'm doing here, laying on a base of petrol blue from Molotow. The head gets based in a desaturated deep green, and then the magic. Mix down some white ink with Flow Improver, that's an agent that adds some body to your ink and prolongs its drying time, which should keep the speckles at bay, and then, concentrating on the upper surfaces, start slowly layering that on. Even going slowly and carefully, this is going to go really fast. Just make sure you build up to a good, punchy, true white for your highest values, and that your overall highlight area is maybe a little bigger than it normally would be. That's what's going to sell this as a properly white mini, as opposed to a bluish-grey mini. I went over the head with a higher saturation green, leaving the desaturated colour in the shadows, but if I were going to do this again, I'd definitely push that contrast up further, adding some yellow into my green and doing a third pass to really push that contrast. Same as before, we hit the details like the hair and the weapons, highlight our edges, and that's another one done. Over halfway, and time to take a trip to the land of the Star Striders. Sneaky as Alaitoc may be, they aren't afraid to strut the fields of war in a punchy colour combo. Luckily for us, the blue and yellow also gives us a chance to have a look at the productivity boost we get from using a universal shade colour. A good saturated blue for the base layer then, and on the head, I first laid down this off-white. The only reason I do that is because I don't own a yellow paint that can act as a primer though. He immediately gets a solid all-over coat of yellow too. Next, we load up with a pure magenta ink. Magic Magenta is a great colour for shading lots of different things, but it's really good with blue and yellow, pushing the blue towards navy and the yellow towards orange, both excellent shade tones for their respective colours. This nadir low light is basically just a zenithal highlight in reverse. The mini is upside down and we're layering in thin coats of magenta to build our shadows. Same deal with the head, which I left off so I could get really easy access to those undersides. You know the drill by now, we need to get the extra bits of yellow and detail done. For the yellow gun, here's a tip. Since yellow's coverage is usually pretty awful, lay in something close to yellow with better coverage first. I used Vallejo Heavy Skin. Also, adding a little white paint to any colour will really up its opacity. If you end up getting too desaturated, you can always glaze in a coat of your original colour at the end and you will be back to bright. Okay, how are we doing? Just one more major craft world to go, and that is Iyanden, the haunted chromatic yin to Alaitoc's yang. But wouldn't it be boring if we painted it the same way? Let's tackle this guy with the tricks we learned from the underpainting series. The go-to underpaint for yellow is pink, so pink it is. I layer on a peachy pastel shade over that to start building towards a highlight, and then finally a nice natural white for the highest value on our upper surfaces. Then the whole body gets an even coat of a warm yellow ink, and the magic of colour mixing leaves us with a gorgeous, rich, well-shaded yellow mini. The head starts life red, because I really want to push the contrast on this one, and over that I do a midtones pass with turquoise. It'll be nice to see a shade of blue that's really distinct from our Alaitoc body colour, so this greenish undercolour should really help with that. Just a little splash of pastel blue at the tip of his pointy little helmet, and then all over with speed paint High Lord blue. And guess what? We hit all the details, get on some edge highlights, and that is the last of our chaps for today, done and done. while we look at the results of our efforts, I have a quick announcement to make. For a while now, there's been a quiet little link to a Patreon page at the very bottom of my video descriptions. I haven't mentioned it because, let's be honest, the channel's in its infancy, and anyway, I'm not so good at the self-promotion stuff. However, a very sneaky Swede discovered the link and actually signed up, and then a few more truly superb folk followed in his footsteps too. So, I want to give those fab chaps a shout out here. Jabalaya, Dargo, and Mechanical Paul, you guys are absolute stars. Thank you so much. Plus, for anyone watching this that also wants to support the channel, if you head over to the pledge page and sign up now, you should be able to nab yourself a spot in the OG crew level. There are 22 places left, but this tier will get you all of the benefits of whatever top tiers I might make in the future, and costs about the same as a half pint of beer here in London. Bargain. So, how about these elves? Who do you like the best? And what tips have you got for batch painting? Remember, any of these techniques can and should be mixed and matched with other techniques and colours to get exactly the look you want. Also, I happen to still have 5 more of these Storm Guardians. Unfortunately, there are 6 more official craft worlds listed in the codex though, so we might have to skip one. If you want to see me paint up the lesser known craft worlds, and you have an opinion on who should make the final cut, head over to the Discord channel linked in the description, and I'll get a poll set up for voting. Okay, thanks for making it this far, and I'll see you next time.